The new era of social media has only been around for a couple of years.
So, understandably, many churches are still getting used to it.
And in my experience, when I get on a call with a church, there's one specific thing that I've seen create eureka moments for churches when we talk about it.
This is what churches always overlook on social media.
Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. We call him Pour Over Papa. It's Alexander.
Why'd you have to say it like that?
Alexander Mills.
Hello.
We have a bunch of your questions here, a mailbag edition of the Pro Church Tools Show. We call it Bro Church Tools. Papa, take us away with the first question.
Okay, we'll get to the pour over questions later, but off the top, let's talk about discovery algorithms. Hi, Brady. I'm extremely interested in learning more about the local element to discovery algorithms. Can you explain that more?
Yeah, so this I have found to be the most misunderstood part of social media for churches. And I think it really matters because it's one of the best parts of the current state of social media for churches and really like churches only or local organizations only, of which churches are a part. To understand it, we have to talk a little bit about social media history. Social media history can easily be broken down into two distinct eras. The first 15 years or so we call the social graph era. This is marked by chronological algorithms and the fact that the content that you see on your feed was inspired by your friend and family connections, aka the social graph. TikTok comes around. They are tremendously disruptive. So disruptive that virtually every other social platform copies what they're doing. And that brings us into a new era that we call the discovery era of social media. We call it this because social is now governed by discovery algorithms. Discovery algorithms are now populating our feeds, and the content that we see is now being inspired by our viewing habits, our personal interests, and importantly, for us as churches, our local geographic location. This is what I mean by that. You could publish a piece of content that is Christian in nature. And a person like me, who's in another country or in another province, another part of the world, I might be the target audience for that type of content. But if I'm not local to your church's location, I'm less likely to see that than someone who is local. And I know this because with the churches that we are working with, they consistently tell me, hey, we're having these crossover events, what we call them crossover events. We're like, I'm in the grocery store and someone comes up to me and they say, are you a pastor? Because you've been all over my feed. That person might not be connected to the church whatsoever. They might not be someone with a faith background whatsoever, but because they are local to where that church is and where they're publishing, what we now have is free distribution to people in our local community who may or may not be affiliated with church or faith whatsoever. Like, this would have been inconceivable in the previous era.
You had to pay for this.
Of social media.
Yeah.
Exactly. You would need to boost posts, and in Meta, you'd be like, within 2 miles, within 5 miles radius of my church. Now, we can just publish content, and it reaches our local world. It's like everything on social changed, and it benefits us perfectly.
It's hard to quantify this. I mean, I think Adam Mosseri may have spoken to this a little bit when he's talking about algorithms. That's for Meta, but like anecdotally, you and I see this in our TikTok feeds all the time. Whatever side of TikTok we're on, whether it's fragrance or foraging or fashion, there's not another. I didn't do the alliteration intentionally. There's not another F I can come up with, but like
fitness.
There we go. In any of those corners of TikTok that we routinely find ourselves on, it happens all the time where we are served a new creator. We like the video, and when we signal that to TikTok by watching it through or liking it or sharing it with one another. So we see that creator again. So much so that like every time we're on TikTok, we expect to see that creator because that's just how the discovery and For You algorithm works. And then a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, you find out somehow that they are not just Canadian, but like local, like, either like usually GTA or, and this one's even crazier. I'm trying to think of an industry where I have encountered this, probably music. I'm introduced to a new musical artist on TikTok. They keep getting served in my feed. I learn that they are living in LA. But then I find out that they are from Toronto. They are not physically located in my area, but TikTok knows that they are local. And this happens all the time. So this is not guesswork here. We're not projecting. Like, this is how this algorithm works. There is some sort of intangible local priority in this discovery algorithm. That is not to say that it won't reach people outside of your local sphere. We know this. The entire world is our oyster now. But there really is what seems to be a predominant local element to this discovery algorithm, which for churches, like you said, it is such an advantage to not just the story we're sharing, but what we're asking people to do, which is what we're hoping people to do is to take a next step with Jesus. If the algorithm is prioritizing sharing our content locally, that means that the folks that it's reaching may have an opportunity to take that next step with us in person where we live. And like I said just a few moments ago, you used to have to pay for that. We have videos on this channel talking about like Facebook ad strategies, like teaching you how to do this with money and targeting. Like, that was a world we lived in, and it is not the world we live in anymore.
I've shared this story before, but my own version of this, not being a pastor, not being stopped in person, hey, are you local to here, is being on the other side. When I went to my dad's 60th birthday party at the Brazilian steakhouse, and the guy walks up and is like, do you want more chicken? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know you from TikTok.
Right.
Oh, you're a fitness influencer on TikTok. You're Canadian? Okay, yes, I would like some more pineapple grilled with my chicken here. I like to compare social media now to traditional media in this respect, because it helps, I think, contextualize this for a lot of people. I started my professional church journey in 2010 as the media director at a new church plant. We did billboards, we did direct mail, and we did TV and radio spots. And when we would talk as leadership about like how we were investing in these, the costs were not insignificant. And why did we do those things? We wanted people to know that our church existed. So you might see the billboard and be like, oh, there's a new church around here. Okay, cool. Like, you might not then directly come to church, but there's this rule of 7 in marketing where like it takes a bunch of different touch points before people are ready to kind of like take a next step towards your organization or your church. And so a lot of the times it's like, hey, people need to know you exist. People need to kind of get a feel for what you're about before they're even willing to evaluate if you want to go there, right? Like, a new restaurant comes to town. You might see them on Instagram. You might have to like, oh, I become aware of them. Oh, I see a couple of their specials in a given week. Oh, they're doing this meal. Oh, someone else mentioned they went there. Okay, all these touch points are happening. Now that might be the final touch point that gets you to book your own reservation for date night or whatever it might be. Social media comes around, and in the social graph era, this doesn't exist. In the discovery era, distribution is free. What we have essentially is billboards, TV and radio ads, direct mail, that are all free, where you'd be like, yeah, I have to design the graphic for the billboard. I have to design the flyer. I have to design or write up, produce the radio or TV spot. But then like, I get to run it for free. And if it's good, more airtime. If it's really good, all the airtime. And then there's one amazing extra, we call this the fallback. In the era of traditional media, if I left a flyer at my neighbor's house 2 doors down and they didn't get connected to church, my congregation doesn't benefit from that at all. But if I publish something on social and it's not a banger post, which is kind of how it goes.
Yeah, 95% of them won't be.
What happens? My existing congregation is still served by hearing the promises of Scripture, by being reminded of the goodness of God in the 167 hours beyond Sunday service. So then every one of these posts is never wasted and the distribution is free.
Yeah.
The reason we harp on this so much is because this era of social media is so much better for creators. And I think people miss it because as consumers of social, we are nostalgic and miss the days where things were a bit simpler, chronological algorithms. People weren't as polished. You didn't worry about like how you were posing. You were just like, hey, here's the food I ate today. And it felt a lot more underground and new. And now it feels like all like, it's like a job almost, like to present yourself a certain way on social. Luckily it is my job, so that makes it easier. But for creators, things are so much better now. And creators specifically as churches, because that local component makes a big deal. It's actually more difficult for me because most of our customers are American and we live
Yeah.
here in Canada.
Right.
And so that's
Yeah,
actually
we're
like-
not trying to reach local.
no, not as much because it's just not our audience in the biggest way. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of engagement and reach, next question. Have you been experiencing issues with Reels engagement and reach?
Yeah, so I do think I've begun seeing things dip a little bit across the board.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned this on Instagram, and then someone DM'd me and said, we just had our biggest day ever.
Oh, there you go.
And that might be because like they haven't been publishing very recently, and maybe this is
Right.
like
We have a
newer for
mature
them. Yeah,
Instagram account. Yeah.
exactly. But the simple principle here is that when cheap property on prime land exists, eventually the demand outpaces the supply and the price goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens in every cycle of social media. This happened on TikTok. New platform comes out. People don't know it's valuable land yet. Some people grab that land up. They're like, hey, it's cheap. I might as well. Suddenly, the value of that land increases. More people want that land. More people buy. Eventually, the demand goes up. And so it's not as easy to acquire said property because the demand is so high.
Yeah.
You have to publish more, or you have to publish better, or you have to be more patient. But the results won't be quite as easy. The ROI won't be quite as high because the demand has gone up. This happened on TikTok. Now you don't break through the way you did a few years ago. But then Instagram copied it. That was the cheap land. We all ran there. Hey, free reach. Great. We love this. And the cycle repeats itself. On the physical planet, all of like the continents have people there, save for Antarctica, which seems uninhabitable. But like we have gone to all those places. Like now, there is still plenty of pockets of the internet that are unexplored, and we're kind of seeing that cycle of property demand and supply. So that's pretty normal. It doesn't worry me when I see it. It's worth kind of lamenting. You're like, good times. It's going to make things a bit more challenging, but you just kind of stay diligent. We have this kind of axiom, the base layer of what we call the social ministry mountain, which is there to demonstrate how do our online efforts translate to offline. The base layer is no weeks off. I can't control how the social platforms shift and change. Anecdotally, I might feel like, oh, wow, reach and views are going down. That also might just be like, oh, maybe I'm not as good lately.
Right. The dopamine's just not hitting as the way it used to.
Right. Or maybe it's just that time of year. I notice for churches, end of year, November, December, our content never performs quite as well. And so I've come to learn that. So when I kind of like plan my content around that, and if something does bomb this time of year, I'm not too worried because I'm like, oh, okay, like you probably shouldn't have like prepared one of your best things for when people don't respond historically. So that's also something to be aware of. I can't control that. I can control no weeks off. I'm going to show up. I'm going to publish every single week. And hey, we'll see where things go from there.
And that being said, it's been your biggest year on Instagram by volume during your 10 years on the platform, right? You've grown by over 40,000 followers this year.
We've more than doubled.
Right, in 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. Well, you've grown an Instagram account, Brady. The next question. What's been the most influential thing to help you grow as a business?
Yeah, the question is really easy to answer, and that is content creation and building trust. We're working on the new Pro Church Tools website right now. And you really liked how we phrased the paragraph around like our products. So on the Pro Church Tools website, you can say, hey, what products do we offer? And well, you tell me like what you liked about that.
I've been here for 7 years.
Okay.
When I joined the company, it was right when Nucleus was born. I joined as we were launching Nucleus. And so like our first software product. Previous to that, you had sold, the Pro Church Handbook, Pro Video Announcements, Pro Church Academy. But most of the public-facing image of Pro Church Tools was free content. And when I was a consumer of that content before I joined, but when I got to know you and I started working here, I was so, as a person, as an employee, as a pastor, I was so thrilled that most of our energy went into creating free content that we just gave away. That was so, I always thought that was the coolest thing ever. And we sell more stuff now than we ever have, like more software, more products. But our free content, this is a great example, this podcast, our blog, all of the resources that you create and hand out and email to our user base all the time, it's still, our free content is still the cornerstone of who we are and what we do and why we do. And on our new website, it is so explicitly stated. It says, our company makes money by selling this piece of software and helping churches one-on-one. But what what our company is built on is all of this free content. And I'm so glad that that is still true. And so explicitly stated. It's like, yeah, we're a company. Like we gotta pay our bills. We have to pay our employees. We have to make money somehow. And so we sell this piece of software that fulfills a lot of the things we talk about in our free content. But we're still more focused than ever on creating and producing and delivering high quality free content that in my estimation is the cornerstone of what we do. And that just really excites me. So to see it so explicitly stated was like, oh yeah, like this pumps me up.
And it's that content that builds trust and builds affinity, builds an audience from scratch. We're 10 years in, and so it's easy to think like, oh yeah, like it's easy to say that now. Like 10 years ago, I was just, and still am, just like a kid in my office, which was also my living room at the time. And I was like, I remember one of the blog posts I wrote, I was like, the best 3 songs off of Hillsong's Cornerstone album. Number 1. Cornerstone.
We're literally still doing that. We just did a draft.
I don't know what you're talking about. That was Hillsong United. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Jeez. So, sometimes people ask, what would you do if you had to start all over again? And I always say, there's 3 things that I point to our professional success. There's hard work, so effort. There's skill, and there's timing. The first 2 you can control. The final one you can't. And the benefit of starting when we started is that we, in 2014, when the company was incorporated, we were around for a couple of years before that, no one was really talking about church social media. Like, wow, what a great time to get on. Sure, but also no one was talking about it because there was no money in it. There's like church digital, like that wasn't a thing that people were spending on. There was no budget there. So the only reason we were the only ones talking about it was because nobody cared about it yet.
Right.
But I could see like where things were headed. And so I was like, hey, we should start talking about this now. And then as people began looking for it, we were like one of the only things there.
So that's the timing piece.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But building trust, building an affinity with people is what gives us the optionality to do everything. We launched software 7 years ago, and Alex got a job because 1,000 churches signed up in the first month. We had never built software before. Why did they put their trust in us? Because we had built trust with them by first giving, and then they were willing to give back. And here we are, 7 years later, building this software platform. 3,000 churches on the platform. Our first ever customer with video announcements still uses our stuff today, which is like so cool. Like more than 10 years ago, he was the first person to put his credit card on the internet and give our company money. And he still uses, that product that he paid for is now defunct. So he still uses Nucleus today, which is like really, really cool. And so it all comes down to trust and attention. And we build that with the content that we create for free that is worth listening to, presumably. And we're going to keep doing that.
You know what's funny? As you're saying that, I realize that this is the same counsel that I give to folks when I do like consultations in the coffee space. So for our listeners who don't know, I used to own a mobile cafe. It was pretty sweet. It was a coffee trailer, but we didn't start as a coffee trailer. We started for 2 years before that, just like doing pop-ups on this really heavy, like solid wood picnic table under like a pop-up tent. And when folks jump on these calls with me and ask me like, hey, how do I start a mobile cafe? And I say, well, don't. I say like, get a table and a tent and find a corner, find a community and build trust over time so that because people always ask like, what's it cost to build a coffee trailer? And I tell them, they're like, oh, I don't have that money. I'm like, yeah, I know you don't. Like most people don't. And so at some point you're going to have to ask either the bank, your mom, or your community to show up for you and invest in your investment when you go to build a coffee trailer. I say, if you just go and drop, $100,000 on a coffee trailer and expect people to show up for you to repay that investment, you're going to have a hard time. But if you build that community first by meeting them where they're at, brewing them coffee on a table under a tent, when you do go to build that trailer or open your cafe, you are going to have a community of people who are going to show up for you. And that's how it worked for us. When we opened our trailer, we didn't have slow days because we weren't new people on the block. We had built community over time. And so when we decided to invest, people showed up for us. And that's analogous to how people showed up for Nucleus. You had, for years, invested in churches by giving this free content so that when it came time for you to have an ask, hey, I need you to invest in us because we want to build this thing, 1,000 people showed up. But if you come out of the gate swinging with no social trust and just saying, hey, I need your money for this product, you're just not going to have that kind of success.
Yeah, and I understand that people are like, wait, so like I have to do all this with no guarantee of return and no immediate return? Like, yeah, that's why it works, because
Right.
like it's so unusual. And this is where the timing aspect comes in as well. I was 21 years old
20.
and I had no money and I was newly married, but we weren't risking like the livelihood of our family because like I didn't make any money anyway. On the other side, if you are 31, you might have some money saved away. Like, oh, you know what? We have worked hard. We've put away this money, and now this gives us a chance to like take a risk on something. So you would have something to fall back on the way that we did it. So I had to put everything into it. If we lost, great, we were in the hole, but like we also had nothing to like, oh, we lost this. Well, we didn't really have much anymore. Yeah, we're more in the red than we were before. Like, you know, okay.
It's all red.
Yeah. So, yeah, time, attention, trust. That's what it's about.
Speaking of coffee, the next question comes in for me.
Oh, I got it. What is Alex's current favorite coffee brewer?
Oh, welcome to the Coffee Corner with Dark Roast Daddy. I am a seasonal person. I eat seasonally. I drink seasonally. I listen to music seasonally. And when it comes to coffee brewers, I am seasonal with those as well.
Really?
Yeah, it's not informed by like the weather or anything.
Oh.
It's just I have so many coffee brewers that instead of just like switching every other day, I will spend an elongated period of time with one brewer. So like for a long time it was the origami dripper. I was brewing with that every day, like 4 times a day I was brewing with that, and exclusively that. Unless I wanted an iced coffee, I would bust out the AeroPress. Lately, I'm in a season of using the Stag X brewer. So it's from Fellow. It's a flat bottom dripper. It's pretty small, and I prefer small doses, like 13 grams of coffee. So I'm using that every morning. But I have to admit, I have automated my coffee process a little bit. And
Sounds like you sold out.
well, there is a little bit of shame associated with this, I think, at first, because like my persona online is brewing coffee manually by hand. I used to brew 4 cups a day by hand, 5 cups if I'm brewing for my wife.
Wow.
And then for anyone with kids, like you just know they disrupt a lot, like a lot of things. And I have a really nice like automated coffee brewer at home. It's called the Ratio 6. We have one here called the Ratio 8, just a big brother. And I would use that when we like entertained multiple guests. It's an easy way to make a lot of coffee. But we were just in a season where we were not sleeping much. And in the morning, I just could not get up like mentally or physically to make a pour over, or never mind make 2. And so I started using the Ratio 6 every morning, and it has just been such a great change of pace. I've probably been brewing my first cup of coffee on the Ratio 6 for like a year now. And now like we've just welcomed our second child to the world. So
So you might enter another season of no sleep.
no sleep, and I might just switch entirely to automated coffee. I don't know what my future holds. But yeah, I'm using the Ratio 6. So I do a double dose, like 1 cup for me, 1 cup for Rebecca in the morning. And then I do like manual pour overs after that for the rest of my coffees of the day. But yeah, the first 2 cups are the Ratio 6, and I'm loving it.
Double dose. Remember when we used to have a daily dose?
Yeah. Wow, that's a throwback. So that's my favorite coffee brewer. How are you brewing your coffee? Is it still on the espresso machine?
Americano in the Breville.
Just one?
One a day.
Yeah.
Yep, 5 a.m. Let's go. Although I've also been in a season of no sleep, and turns out that like my output in life is just narrowly works because I have just such good sleep. That's got disrupted, and like I get to the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I've died. I'm dead. And then suddenly I'm like, am I not able to like do everything perfectly all the time without sleep? Evidently, yes.
Well, the sun sets at 4 o'clock now too, so that doesn't help.
I was in bed the other day at 6:52.
Yeah. And that's what time the earth is saying to go to bed.
Right. Like you might think I'm crazy, but look outside.
The sun has been set for 2 hours. Of course I'm going to bed. Hey, Brady. I'm the youth pastor of a 500-member church in Juarez, Mexico. I was just assigned to lead our social media strategy as well, but I don't know where to begin. What do you recommend for me to do? I have followed you for some time, and I know that you are the man in social media.
Well, I appreciate the support. I would point you to the church social media masterclass on YouTube. We published basically all of my thoughts. It's an hour long on YouTube,
I
right?
would talk about our free content.
This is what I'm saying, right? I would sell this course if I was a normal, if we didn't,
Right.
normal
Yes.
meaning most people do content to monetize content because it is not easy to be a full-time content creator that also runs a software company, that also runs an agency. As I just told you, apparently I can't do it anymore either if I don't get enough sleep. So what normally happens is you have content that monetizes into even better content. Our approach is you want to pay for us to work with you one-on-one, great, socialsermons.com. You want to use our software, great, nucleus.church. Everything that we give away on the content is the best it is that we have to offer.
Yeah, we're not holding anything back.
Case in point, the 49-minute social media masterclass for churches on YouTube. Just search Church Social Media Masterclass.
We'll link it in the description.
You'll find it there. It's the best place to start. It's got it all.
I was so thoroughly impressed by that piece of content.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, the editor also was like, man, this was like some of your best stuff. And I was like, wow, we must have really done something good here.
He's like, you sure you want to give this away?
No,
you sure you want to put this on YouTube?
$97.
Okay. I need answers from you for these 4 albums. Are you ready? Number 1, your favorite album of all time. Number 2, the album you're most sentimental about, which can be hard to define, so maybe we'll talk about that. Number 3, the first album that you loved. And number 4, the album you fell in love with most recently.
Okay.
It should be stated because we talked about this in the office. You weren't here.
Oh.
You can imagine how Tristan responded to this question.
Melted
deep
onto the
anguish.
floor and was like, I'll have to take a week off.
Almost, like literally almost could not continue. And I had to talk him down. I'm like, Tristan, like we're not holding you to this.
You're not going to perjure yourself.
It's not, this is not getting inscribed on your tombstone. Like, it's okay. We're just talking about music. Now, to his credit, if the questions were songs, like your favorite song of all time.
But that's not even a question that can be
Exactly.
answered.
I'd have no way to answer that. So it just should be said, a disclaimer. We are not held to these opinions. These are how we feel right now. It's just a feeling. It's not empirical. And for the first one, your favorite album of all time. It's an impossible question, but
I can't believe you chose this.
it was the first one that came up in my mind. That's how I answered a lot of these questions was, oh, what's the first one that comes to my mind?
Sure.
And this one has been one of the most meaningful records to me, like on a, that word, like on a meaning level. And it's Zeal by King's Kaleidoscope.
This is Becoming. That's the name of their first record.
Becoming Who We Are.
That's it, right. That to me, I have always loved a lot more than Zeal. And it's one of my favorite records of all time. I think it's so superior to Zeal, which is why I'm actually glad to see this as your favorite album of all time, because that just points to how music speaks to us all differently.
We never talked about the King's K concert that Rebecca and I just went to.
Oh, in Pittsburgh.
They called it the King's Kaleidoscope Tour. So they're not just touring their 2 latest records. It's like the whole thing.
Oh, the Eras Tour. Okay.
Basically. And so there was like all sorts of mashups, and like they would do a hook or a verse or a chorus and a bridge of a song here, but like not play the whole song, which was great because you got like their whole catalog, and they played Defender. It's an entirety. It was like everyone came out of the woodworks on that song and was singing the top of their lungs. It was pretty awesome.
So for my favorite album of all time, I'll have to credit one Tristan Prasad, even in his ashes and burlap sack as he mourns his choices. Novo Amores Cannot Be Whatsoever. What I love about this album is it's a tight 35 mins. No skips. You know, for your favorite album of all time, I feel like it has to be a no skip.
Yeah.
And I have an Evernote of like my no skips albums, and there's like 6. So like already I'm working with like a small number. And this album, you know, speaking of seasonal listening, this is an autumnal album. You know, I start seeing that sun a little bit lower to the horizon. You get that nice crispy fall air, and this album gets played on a walk, and I love it.
It's so good. Well, speaking about feelings, how do you to the next question? How do you define sentimental? The album you're most sentimental about?
So I think there has to be a certain amount of like time between this and when you were first introduced to it. That's one objective measure, right? So the one that I chose, Everglow by May, that's 10 years at least, like 10 years plus. And then I also think about like, what is your visceral reaction when you hear this music, right? Like when this needle drops, depending on what's going on, like what are you responding to? Like if I hear this anywhere,
Right.
and it's a concept album. So what's also cool about this is it's not like you hear a song and you're like, oh, that's a great song on this record. You hear a song and you go, oh, we're doing this for the next hour.
Right.
Like stop everything.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah,
thoughts on how you measure it.
I think the time bit is really important, like, and it's hard to quantify, but like there has to be some measure of distance from like when you encountered it or when it was so meaningful to you, and some measure of distance to like where we are now trying to answer this question. So I assume for a lot of folks listening who grew up in church, like when you think about the most sentimental albums, maybe it's related to youth group, like maybe a Hillsong record, maybe it's one of the first youth conferences you went to and you saw a Hillsong, or you saw, I don't know, whoever else was touring, and maybe you raised your hands for the first time. I raised my hands at Delirious for the first time.
Jeff Deo.
Wow. So maybe it's that. For me, my brother was 10 years older than me, and so I got introduced to a lot of music through him. And if I didn't have a brother 10 years my senior at this specific time in Christian music history, I'm not sure I would have ever encountered Christian ska, but I did. And so there's a record by Five Iron Frenzy called Quantity is Job One. And it's just like when I thought about a record that brings me back to a time and place and memory shared with people, it was this record. There's a whole collection of songs on this record called These Are Not My Pants. And it's just like, it's Five Iron Frenzy, they're ridiculous. And so much time listening to this music with my brother and my two cousins that when I think about a record that brings me back to a place and a time with people, it's this one.
I think that the sentimental part of the record, it has to be you have to have experienced it in two different like eras of your life.
Yeah.
Because the record transcends time and meets you in the two different versions of yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what makes it sentimental. Like you remember the original version of yourself that heard this. You're now 3, 4, 5, 7 different software updates since that person, and it's still speaking to you maybe in different ways, but you still remember it speaking to you in the original way.
Yeah.
And that its ability to time travel is what makes it so, important to you.
Next question, also related to time, which is, what is the first album that you loved?
The self-titled record, debut album by Christian rapper Flame. The record is called Flame. I memorized every lyric on this album.
Was this your introduction to Christian rap?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So the CD that I bought from the Christian CD shop, it's got Flame, and he's like in like this green haze of smoke. This is pre-Lecrae, people, okay? This is before Lecrae came out with his debut record, okay? Mm-hmm. This is predates that,
yeah.
At least for me. And I knew every single, and it was just like, that was, I mean, I had Bye 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 by NSYNC.
Wow.
Which is not the name of that album.
I wouldn't know.
They're all like puppets on that album. Pardon me, I forget the name. And I remember like, I was always like embarrassed when my dad would put it on into the car radio. And I was like, I'm listening to pop. This is weird. Like I had Millennium by Backstreet Boys. That's a big one too. But this was the first one where like my dad and I would listen to together. And he was like, I like it, son.
Nice.
I like it. And I was like, I like it too, Dad.
I put The Beautiful Letdown by Switchfoot. Again, brings me back to actually a similar time and place as the Five Iron Frenzy stuff. Like my first ever concert I went to was a Switchfoot concert with my brother, my dad, my brother's friends at a bar in Toronto called the El Macombo. But The Beautiful Letdown is I think the first record that meant something to me, like personally.
Right.
Like it finds yourself at that intersection of like I don't know how old you have to be to find personal meaning in music like that, but whether it's 10, 11, 12, like around that age you find something that's like, oh, it's not just something I'm enjoying or something that like something around me is enjoying, so I think it's good. It's like, no, this is connecting with me personally, and so it was Beautiful Letdown, and it's the perfect timing to be reflecting on that record because Switchfoot just re-released that record, Taylor Swift styles, by releasing our version. So they re-recorded the whole record. Sounds great, and then like a month later, they released a version of this record where they got, I don't know how many songs are on the record, 13 different artists to re-record all of these songs, like including the Jonas Brothers, the guy from Sleeping at Last, the guy from 21 Pilots, Monica Martin, like all these different, Reliant K, all these different artists have just released their own versions of these songs. So that's recent.
Let me tell you about my first interaction. Like, when is music meaningful to you personally? By sharing with you the chorus of my favorite track off of Flame's album, Flame. This is from the track Money. Okay. And this came out 2004. So I was 13 when this came out. Okay, ready? If you insecure poor, you gonna be insecure rich. If you smoke weed poor, you gonna smoke weed rich. If you smack cats, shot cats, got flaps, did it all poor, you gonna smack, shoot, flap, all rich. Wow. That meant something to me as a 13-year-old Canadian suburbanite white boy.
That's not what I was expecting.
Now, you didn't know.
I listened to a lot of hip hop. Flame was not in my repertoire. Maybe I'll go revisit that record this afternoon and experience what 13-year-old Brady was.
I know you're sick of being second like the B letter. You think you get cheddar, your situation will be better? And I was like, nah, we ain't about that money. We about the Lord. We need Jesus.
Well, fast forward how many years? 18 years. And the album you most recently fell in love with, also a hip hop record.
Drake, For All the Dogs. Now, people are saying this is not the album, Drake. It came out, people were like, I don't know. People don't understand anything, okay? This is a classic. I told Chris when it came out, I texted him, classic. And he's like, I don't know. Texted him a week later, classic. There is a 4-song stretch with 7969 Santa into, with SZA, Slime You Out, into Bahama's Promise, into one of my favorite Drake songs of all time, Tried Our Best. A 4-track, perfect, 1, 2, 3, 4 of R&B Drake that is just unassailable. And there's a song at the end of the album called Away. It's called, let me make sure I get it right. I'm not great with the names. Away From Home. That's like Drake in his You Don't Remember Where I Came From bag, which he hasn't been in that bag in a while. Started From the Bottom, that's a famous in that version. But he's rapping about his friends from grade school, and he's like, you might think that I forgot you, but I remember that time too. And Drake famously will rap about levels of riches that people have to Google. There's a line on every record where it's like, yeah, I'm skiing out in Courchevel, and I'm like, okay, where is this? Oh, it's a resort in the Swiss Alps that you can only private jet into. Right. Okay, thanks, Drake. Yeah, now we understand. Yeah. And so it was kind of great to see him get back into that hey, relatable bag. So yeah, I'm vibing this. I've listened to it today. It's been several weeks since it came out. It's not a no skips. It's not perfect. I don't know how you do a 37-track album or whatever it is and be perfect. But I mean, even the intro, Virginia Beach, is one of his best intros ever. Big fan. And you know what? If you're going to be insecure poor, you're going to be insecure rich.
Listen, that's what I've always said.
I've always said that.
The album is great.
You like it?
Yeah, I haven't been a fan of, because I was a fan of really early Drake, when he was YMCMB, back with Lil Wayne,
Sure.
And it was a whole thing. And I haven't been thrilled with the last couple releases of his. But this record, I mean, 8 AM in Charlotte is so good. There are some really good songs on this record.
And you know how we talk about fragrances and how you wear a fragrance in a certain place to remember it forever? You and I always got to experience Scorpion together because we listened to it driving home from Utah to the Vegas airport. And this album just happened to drop when I was driving home from Vermont. And so I listened to it driving through the peak leaves.
Yeah.
And so I'll always, every time I listen to it, I always remember listening to it on that drive. And I knew that was going to happen. And I was like, thank you, Lord, for this just majestic timing. Because he delayed this album multiple times. But
the album I most recently fell in love with, which it is the end of 2023. And, barring some sort of aberration, I'm confident in saying that this is actually my favorite record of the year.
Wow.
It's called Unreal Earth by Hozier. Hozier famously known for his song Take Me to Church. And this record is a bit of a concept album in the sense that it is written about the 7 layers of hell in Dante's Inferno. And that is truthfully that's beyond me. But what Hozier does effectively is takes those concepts and weaves them into a tapestry that is relatable to everyone. So anyone can listen to these songs and see their own love story reflected in them, or like, just their own story reflected in it. But also knowing that underneath all of this, like, he is pulling from this great piece of literary work and writing about stuff that is like really, truly beyond my level of comprehension. And musically, it's just like, it's unreal. I mean, to steal a phrase from the title. So every year I make a habit of buying my favorite record of the year on vinyl. It's kind of like how I immortalize my music collection.
Nice.
And so I bought this one.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's in the pantheon.
It is. All right, next question. What's one new habit you started this year that has been a game changer in your life?
So, got a bike in the basement, stationary.
Like
doing
Peloton?
Yeah, something like
Something
that. Yeah.
Is
So,
that like it has a screen?
no,
Oh.
but my iPad's hooked up to it.
But you're not doing like spinning classes.
No. I do zone 2 cardio.
Cool.
So that's motivated by Peter Attia, Outlive, one of my favorite books of the year. It's basically like my heart rate's in between 128 and 142-ish. And I have power meters on the pedals, so I know exactly how much wattage I'm putting out. This is when, like, you prick your finger and you check the lactate levels, that sort of thing. So I'm doing that. I've paired that with watching movies I've never seen before.
On the iPad.
Yeah.
Cool.
So this has been great because I've never historically done too much cardio. I've begun, walking 10,000 plus steps a day. That's been great. This is the zone 2. So I'm now kind of like also in that part. And then next year I've got to add like a couple high intensity, like sprinting or all out exercises to kind of get through the spectrum of all the cardio. And then I still have my, mobility work. And then of course my resistance training. But the game changer has been like, I've always wanted to like, oh, well, what about The Godfather? I was like, I don't know. I was like 9 or I was like 7 and like, we didn't see that. Like,
I mean, I got publicly shamed at church 2 weeks ago for admitting that I've never seen The Sound of Music. And I said to my congregation, I'm like, they almost excommunicated me. And I said, what do you expect from me? I'm like, I had a brother who was 10 years older than me. So functionally, I lived as an only child, an only son. I'm not watching The Sound of Music. And why am I watching it now?
Yeah. You're like, oh, I want to get my Julie Andrews bag.
Yeah.
Precisely. So to cover up my shame, I've begun quietly rewatching these things.
Well,
So
and because you have the time.
exactly.
What else are you
I'm
going to do?
just sitting there and I'm like, this is a perfect. So I have a giant list. Feel free, listeners, send in, and in the comments below this YouTube video, let me know
Can I suggest The Sound of Music?
I have seen The Sound of Music. Yes, I have been in my Von Trapp family bag before. In fact, a little too much as a child because it was one of my mother's favorite movies. I think she just loved the idea of like gallivanting through the fields of Austria.
Sure.
So I've seen that. I have been going through like all of Denzel's work. So I'm on Malcolm X right now. I'm probably going to get into some of the older Scorsese stuff next. Like I've never seen Casino. I've never seen Taxi Driver. I've never seen like some of those older like mob movies where like it's De Niro, it's Pacino, So
Have you seen Pulp Fiction?
Yes. Okay. And I hated it.
Really?
It disturbed me to my core. Wow. I remember being like, I feel so icky.
Yeah.
The only other time I've ever felt that way about a movie is when I watched Clockwork Orange, which is also just like distressing.
Right.
I mean, it is ultra violence. That's kind of the big famous quote from that.
So which one of those movies that you've watched have stood out?
Training Day with Denzel. That was a big one. I really liked the Equalizer trilogy. That was great. And then, Spike Lee's He Got Game, which is the Ray Allen, Jesus Shuttlesworth, and Denzel movie as well. Those have all been great. I rewatched Arrival, Denis Villeneuve, with Hawkeye and Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner. That's one of my favorite films. So it was great revisiting that. Oh, you know what I rewatched as well? Edge of Tomorrow, which is the Emily Blunt, Tom Cruise movie that was originally called Live, Die, Repeat. Okay. And then like they changed the name of the movie upon like DVD release. I think it was a 2012 movie. And it didn't get like well received. And so everyone thought it was a bad movie. And then every time people saw it, they're like, yo, this movie's amazing. And so it kind of got like this second life, which ties in with the fact that they rewrote the movie title and the fact that it's kind of a Groundhog Day type of movie. Cruise is great in it. It was like pre-Emily Blunt. Like we didn't really know like what kind of actress she would become. Right. So that was a good one too. Yeah.
Interstellar just had an anniversary. Maybe you should mix in a rewatch there.
I've seen that probably enough times. Like I've seen that 3 times that I'm not ready for the rewatch. But hey, we love a Nolan. Oppenheimer. I hope it sweeps everything. Like big fan. Killers of the Flower Moon can suck it, like take a back seat.
Really?
I liked it, but it wasn't really for me. You know, everyone's like, oh, it's so long. The length is fine. Like it was just, I don't know. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Whereas like Oppenheimer was like, that's a movie like made for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give Downey the best supporting actor. Give Nolan best director. Give it best picture. I'm gonna lose at this year's Oscars
Because it's going to be emotional.
Yeah, because I am in. Yeah, I'm the mark for Oppenheimer. I'm like, oh, it's gonna win all of them, and then Scorsese will just like win everything or something. I don't know.
Well,
do you have a habit this year? That
my habit that I started this year, I actually reclaimed this year.
Wow.
So this is a habit that I had prior to having kids, which was like getting up before the rest of my house. It's just something I saw my dad do. I don't think I'm naturally a morning person. So I had to like cultivate this over time. But I used to get up like an hour or two before the rest of the house and just have quiet time, have my coffee, do some reading. Then you have a kid and like we've already mentioned, like they just disrupt your life and especially your sleep habits. And so like there was a while there when Asher was young that I was trying to maintain it. And I realized like this is killing me. Like I don't need to wake up at this hour. Like I can sleep until 7 and that can be okay. And then, Asher grows up and starts sleeping through the night and sleeping till 7 o'clock. And so this year I have reclaimed getting up an hour before the rest of the house. I get up, go down to my study, read a book, drink my coffee. It's been great. I have since forsaken that due to our second born. I'm now in a sleep deficit again. And so check back in with me in about a year or two when I reclaim this habit again. But yeah.
I also get up an hour before the family and have done so. Even when our second kid came, like once she was sleep trained, so post 5 months, I got back to the 1 hour before. So she would wake up at 6. I'm always up at 5. And it really is just one of the best. It affects your life positively in virtually every way. And I'm the same way. I don't know if anyone's like naturally a morning person. Surely someone is, but like everyone's like, oh, I'm not a morning person. Like, do you think the morning people are? Like,
right, it's not easy.
You're right. It's like, no one is like, oh wow, you're really good at like only eating like fruits and vegetables. Were you born that way? No. Like every good habit has been cultivated. Everything is difficult before it becomes easy. That's just the way the world operates. And it just positively affects virtually every area of your life. I get so much more done. I make so many better decisions throughout the day. It's more likely that I go to sleep at a good time that evening. And there's something just special about that time as well.
It's so
in
quiet.
the deepest of winter, it's so cozy.
Yeah.
In the summer, the sun rises where we live at 5 a.m. And so you get to see like that pink purple sky when no one else is going to see it because nobody else is up at that time. And I remember I read a book in college because I started doing this when I started building the company. And I read a book and it was like 30-day challenge to waking up early because my dad is a firefighter my whole life. So he would wake up at 5 a.m. to drive to the city for his 24-hour shift. And I just remember like, how could a human do this? And he's like, you do it for your family. And I was like, well, you're a sicko. Get a new job. So there was this book and it was like a 30-day, like you're going to wait and you're just give me 30 days and I can show you can be a morning person. And that book, I have no idea what it was called. It was like some like just cheap junky ebook. It wasn't like a bestseller. I don't mean it was junk. It just wasn't like I can point it to you on Amazon.
It did the trick.
Changed my life forever because I realized, oh, I can be that person. And it was just like a limiting belief that I was like, I can't wake up that early. And then I did it for a week and I was like, oh, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
And I got a bunch done.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'd much rather wake up an hour earlier than go to bed an hour later.
100%.
Especially with kids. Like I am so
What am I doing?
non-productive in the evening.
No, I'm not. What am I doing? Oh, one more episode of insert this show
Exactly. 5 to 6 a.m. is such a dad hour to be awake. You just know there's a bunch of dads around just doing stuff.
here. Yeah. And that makes you like, you're like, oh.
Solidarity. Okay, moving on. How do you keep attracting people to your church when 6 months out of the year your Sundays compete with the Packers? No, seriously. I know we have a unique situation in Green Bay, but we cannot be the only city competing with the big sports teams around worship time. So what's the game? Nice. What's the game-winning strategy to bring people to Jesus in a setup like that? Hold on, before you start. I was listening to a sermon this week, or the other week, from a pastor who is a pastor in Missouri. And it was the week that the Chiefs were playing in Germany. So the game was at 9:30 a.m. And in the middle of the sermon, he's like, stop watching the game and listen to what I'm saying to you right now. Because they were playing literally during church service.
Yeah. I was watching that game on my walk.
Yeah,
This
of course.
this past weekend. Before church at 11. So your church is competing with the Packers, which is good because the Packers are competing with no one on the field.
Right.
because they're trash this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So
So not
this,
stiff competition.
this problem was fixed because nobody's watching them because they're awful.
Yeah.
So, okay, in all seriousness, you're not the only church dealing with something like this,
Right.
right? There are churches that are in college towns. And so they're like, how do we reach people when like every few years they disappear?
Mm-hmm.
There are churches that serve on military bases or in military towns, and they have similar kind of just like transient nature. And so like, it's not unheard of for churches to deal with like these unique local challenges based on like the region that they serve in.
I mean, at the risk of pushing the question too far, most churches are facing this issue with online church right now. Like
Right.
folks, online church is so accessible, whether it's your church or another church, and folks are choosing to stay home in their PJs because during COVID, a lot of us got a taste of what it's like to do church at home. And it's like, well, this is easier. So
Man, I love church. Did I tell you that?
you haven't told me that recently.
I had someone come out to me this week and someone on a social sermons call with a new church. The latter was more bizarre, where they were like, are you a Christian? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, and do you go to church? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, what's your church's name? And I was like, Central in Niagara on the Lake. And they're like, okay. And to the social sermons church, I was like, did you have a bad experience with like a
Right.
Christian vendor that you found out like actually didn't love the Lord?
Yeah, could
But
be.
I was at our trunk or treat because apparently now Canadian churches do trunk or treat.
Yeah.
Thanks, America. I remember finding out about trunk or treat a decade ago, and I was like, did I misspell this? Like, am I misreading
Yeah.
trunk, or what does this mean? Not a thing that we knew about 10 years ago, at least where we live. So I'm at trunk or treat, and I'm walking with this guy, and we know each other kind of like through a family. Like, I don't really know him that great. He's like, we've been talking for like an hour. You know, we were just the two dads that like attached to each other
Yeah.
at the trunk or treat. And then he's like, oh, and do you love the Lord? And I was like, and I told him, I was like, you know what? Kind of stranger. There was a while there where I was really worried. I was like, I'm a very empirical person. I have an empirical worldview. One day I will answer this question.
It's my fault.
And I remember having a crisis of faith where I was like, I'm having a lot of trouble with like the infallibility of scripture or just like the atrocities of the Christian faith or like the divide within the faith and how like people smarter than me fall on both sides of either camp. And like my empirical mind is not able to reconcile my faith, which by nature cannot be fit within a box. And like, it was a big deal. And then one day I woke up and I didn't care about it anymore. And it never came back. And I can literally only attribute it to the providence of God, who one day was like, I understand, my son,
Yeah, it's enough wrestling.
and I will remove this from you. And he just removed it. And then I'd be at church and I was like, you know what I love? The Lord. And I took the opportunity on this call, on this show, but also with that call and with that person to share my testimony.
Wow, look at you.
My second testimony. There's the
Yes,
original
yes,
testimony of
right.
like, I found the Lord. This is my second testimony of like, he found me.
Right.
Or he was like, look, scales fall from your eyes. You know, I can't see you, Lord. I need, the empirical worldview is not compliant with your
Wow.
existence. And then he was just like, my son. And I was like, wow, I love church. Anyway, I love church.
Yeah, I love that.
And
you
I
love
love the
church.
Lord.
Yeah.
And it makes me happy being
Yeah,
there.
me too.
So what do you do?
Fighting the Packers. What are you gonna do?
If you live on the West Coast, you're fighting with red zone at 10 a.m. anyway.
Yes.
Right? So like, it's tough. Two responses I could think of.
That is funny. We're on the East
We're
Coast.
never going to answer this
Never.
question.
Sundays are the best on the East Coast because you get up, you go to church, you
I
go
come home,
you
I sit
make
down.
a lunch, you sit down on the couch.
Da-da-da, da-da-da.
Exactly.
And I never talk to my family again for 9 hours.
Yes.
But every time September comes around, it's like, yes, the kids are back at school. No.
I've lost my husband.
So, two responses I can think of. Last chance to derail this question and answer before. Okay.
No, let's answer it.
There could be aggressive pushback or there could be accommodation.
Okay.
I don't think like the reality is the reality. You can't change the fact that you serve in Green Bay, in Wisconsin, where the Packers are like the
You're
only
probably a
professional
Packers
sports
fan
team.
yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the only reason the city exists is like because of the stadium. Like
Yeah.
this isn't like Milwaukee, like where it's a city and there are sports teams. Like this is like the city is the team. So you could aggressively push against it and be that kind of like, you backslidden jokers choosing a pigskin over the Lord. Right? You could be that type of pastor. And we've seen that in all types of churches, right? Like you get people to get serious by being extreme. You want extreme from them, you're going to be extreme with them. And it kind of creates like those. I was a part of a church like this in youth group. And it was part of why like I was so intensely focused on God. It was so bad. My parents, when they grounded me, would ground me from youth group.
Yeah.
Like, because like that was the only thing they could take away from me. Like, you're going to take the Lord away from me? How dare you? And they're like, yeah, we're going to take him away from you. Yep, he's taken away. Guess what? He's still in your room where you'll be. Not at youth group on Friday night. How do you like that? So you could go like extreme pushback. Probably not the way you want to go. And so then you kind of just have to be like accommodation, which is like, you're not going to get people, I don't believe, to give up on sports. It's a reality. It's probably not something that you can fight against. And so if that's reality, how can you work within it? Not the best reply I've ever come up with, but I was trying to deal with reality here.
I mean, my first thought is like, if and on the accommodation side, like obviously wear your Green Bay jersey to church. I'm happy to do that. When the Leafs make the playoffs, I wear my Leafs jersey until they are not in the playoffs anymore to church.
Now, I find this interesting. Because you're the type that would be like, if you bring a flag of a nation into this sanctuary, I will burn it on sight. And yet you're preaching me like, hey, we're going to win the cup for the first time since '67.
That's right.
Incongruent?
I don't know. Maybe I'll do some soul searching on that. But I mean, depending on what time of day the game is and depending on how seriously you want to accommodate this, like you could lean into it and you could put the pregame show on the screens in the lobby after church. You know?
Right. You know that we always finish by 12:30. Now,
Right.
the problem, I think, is like maybe tailgating culture.
Yeah.
Because like
depending on how many people are like going to the game.
Green Bay is East Coast start time. So they're in Central. So maybe the start time is at noon.
Yeah.
But like what? You can obviously finish church by noon, which could lead in 17 weeks of the year into the game and everyone's having community around the game. But maybe tailgating starts at 9 and that's the issue. Because obviously the start time you could avoid.
Could be. I think there are creative. I obviously we're both kind of endorsing the accommodation route. I think there are really creative, like fun ways, like ways that are congruent with how you live your daily life, how you relate to the people in your church beyond the 167 hours of your Sunday service, right? Like it's okay to incorporate. I'm of the belief that it's okay to like acknowledge and incorporate that truth into the communal life that you share, even on Sundays. Like maybe not from the stage, maybe we don't have the game playing on the screen on the stage, but like it's okay to acknowledge that like the Packers are playing today and you all chose to be here. So like after church, when you're enjoying a coffee in the lobby, like the pregame is on the TV,
but not the actual game.
I mean, depending on what time service ends and what time the game starts.
I mean, you could like
For the game and the
time
team.
the benediction with the kickoff.
Go ahead, or like move your small group. Like move your small group to Sunday afternoon for the season or something,
Right.
or create a football small group for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
Right.
Some of my favorite memories from church are going to church and then playing football after church.
Right.
And it became this ritual where like we'd go to church and then we'd play football after church. And it wasn't something that you could do year round because we live in Canada. And so we'd have like, 4 months of the year where it was summertime and we could. So again, it's only 17 weeks of the year, football regular season. And so it could be something that you look forward to. Oh, this is like almost the rhythm of our church that is unique to, and we're just following. This isn't the Christian calendar. This is, the football calendar that we lean into, and it could become this positive thing.
Yeah. Love that.
Of course, some people might say that we're worshiping at the altar of the pigskin.
And that's all right. I think that's actually probably an appropriate pushback.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you think it's a bad idea?
No, I think it's an idea that that you can tease out and like even discern like in your community. Like how much of this of the American culture are we going to acknowledge and accommodate and incorporate into our like Sunday morning culture? I think that's a fine conversation to have and discern on an individual basis.
Right, because enjoying football is not idolatry on its own.
Right.
So there should be a way for it to become something that we integrate.
Yeah. All right, next question.
Every church hosts the big game on the big screen in which they use the word Super Bowl because it's illegal.
Right.
So we're really just dovetailing off of that.
Yeah, I mean, trunk or treat's another example.
Sure.
We're just talking about trunk or treat.
Yeah, we're talking 17 days of the year instead of 1.
Yeah. What are some fashion trends that you are embracing this season? This season, late autumn, early winter.
AW23, as we call it.
didn't know we called it that.
Yeah,
That's a real thing?
it's SS 24 and AW 23.
I literally had no idea.
Yeah, spring summer 24, autumn winter 23.
I love that.
Yeah. AW 23, and then we'll go into spring summer 24
Yeah,
next
yeah,
year. Yeah. So AW 22 was all about knits. Revelation. I have so many knits. I will buy all the knits,
You have that knit in multiple colors.
and I hope to have it in more.
Well, that's the thing, though. You find a good knit, a good sweater, a good pair of pants that fit you, that love you. You love them back by buying them in every color.
I do. And I was at Acne on Wednesday last week, and I was buying some new jeans. It's the only Acne in Canada, and I walked in.
Yorkdale?
Yeah. I walked in, and they were like, "Great to see you. How's your baby?"
No way.
Yes, what? And I knew.
Well, was she with you last time?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a little heartthrob.
But I've only been there three
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
And they remembered me.
Yeah, credit to them.
Yeah. But I realized I was upsetting one of the new reps named Nikki. Thank you, Nikki. I'm wearing the jeans right now. And I walk in and I was like, I'm here for some denim. She's like, great. And I was like, I'm looking for maybe your 2003 silhouette. And I was like, but I also want to try out your 2021 silhouette, your 1991 silhouette. So they do their silhouettes by year. And she's like, okay, what kind of wash? And I was like, bring me every wash. I wanted a dark wash, but last time I was there, I discovered like these sand washes that I wouldn't have found if I didn't let them kind of lead me. And so I get into the change room. She brings up all of them. And I go, oh, actually, I have all of these. She'd been gone for 10 minutes. And she looks at me and she's like, and I was like, oh, I should have been more specific because I just made you do all this work. Anyway, Nikki and I patched it up. And by the end, she was like, we were on the same page. Okay. Like, hey, we're working together here. But I was like, okay, I need a dark wash. And she brings out the 2021 silhouette, and it had this little flare at the bottom, which I liked, but I wasn't quite ready for a flare. And then she brought out the 1991s, my birth year, which I'm wearing right now.
Wow.
And I was like, this is it. So really happy about that. This is part of the new trend, which is like more relaxed fit denim that stack on the feet. So when I got into fashion I was like, 22, 23 years old. I remember going through like an online course because I grew up in like a non-fashion household. And by fashion, I just mean like clothes that fit, like any type of style, any semblance. So not even fashion, just like fine style, not embarrassing style. I had embarrassing style. And I'm going through this course and they mentioned denim length. And they're like, okay, denim length. You want your jeans to roughly fall at your ankle bone. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I've been following that rule ever since until one day I was in Paris. Guess where I was in Paris? Acne. And I'm buying a pair of jeans and the rep goes, I put on a pair. I'm like, I love these. He's like, you should get a longer pair. And I tried on a longer pair and I was like, he's like, no, those are good. They stack at the bottom. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you want your jeans to like stack at the bottom. Like they hit the bottom and they kind of like build up because they're too long. And I was like,
It's like, actually, I went through a course.
I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I didn't buy them. Actually, I bought both. I just never wore the ones that he told me to buy. And then one day my wife is like, yeah, like I like when the pants stack. And I was like, what? And then I realized that I had such blinders on about like this specific fit that I hadn't realized everyone was wearing pants that stacked.
Times are changing.
Yeah. So I realized that I am a fool. And so many outfits that I had, they started to make sense when I put on the jeans with the stack at the bottom because I normally wear these like smaller tops that are cropped. If you don't wear the smaller cropped top, for lack of better terms, with like a bigger billowy pant, it's like too much of the same thing. And I realized what was not working and how it was all beginning to fit together. The other big thing I'm looking at this year are cardigans.
Well, I was going to say, what are you doing wearing knit?
A button down knit.
No, I was saying, what are you doing wearing that now? That was so AW22.
Yeah, but we're building, we're stacking, if you were.
Nice.
Over the years, because I used to like change my wardrobe every year because I had no trajectory, no foresight. Now that I'm like 3 years into the wardrobe, it's great to bring things back out. You break the knits out of storage. You bring out the darker wash denim, the thicker jeans. You bring out the boots. You bring out the the cold weather fragrances. And now it's like, okay. And then you can experiment with trends when the baseline of your wardrobe is set.
Right.
The problem is I would always try to choose a trend, but I had like no solid foundation. It's like getting like a really cool thing that you see at like a home decor shop, but like nothing in your home is designed already. So you just have like this one weird thing. That weird thing makes sense if you have a good solid foundation.
I haven't seen you wear corduroy yet. Or not corduroy. I was just thinking about the pants I'm wearing, which are corduroy, which we've now successfully brought back from the dead from 1999. I haven't seen you wear a cardigan yet. Are you going to bust one out for maybe our dinner date at Promore Set?
You have seen me wear a cardigan.
When?
On the episode that, as on the day that we record this, came out today.
Wow.
Yeah, it was blue, Amy, unbuttoned, white shirt underneath.
Oh, maybe right, because it was unbuttoned. That didn't strike me as a cardigan.
Yeah, I don't. It's like a jacket. I usually don't button or zip up my jackets either.
Cardigans had a moment. The V-neck cardigans had a moment, probably 10 years ago, and I gave them a try and just never felt comfortable in them. So I never went for it. Bought one or two. Never felt good about myself, so didn't wear them again.
Well, that's the thing about trends. Not everyone is going to vibe with you.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You need to know the trends that make sense for you.
I have loosened the fit of my pants a little bit, but not a lot.
Well, and that's the first step, right? Like it took me many years to get to this relaxed fit that I'm wearing now. Because I had skinny jeans, which then became slim fit, which then became straight fit, which then this year became relaxed fit.
Right.
If I had walked out from like skinny or even from slim fit to relaxed fit, it would have been impossible. And this is what I've learned is that there are some fashion changes that are so dramatic that typically that's where people at a certain age get stuck. It's like, this is too much. I wear it. I feel ridiculous.
Right.
And that's where like, there are people that are our age that are going to be wearing skinny jeans for the rest of their lives, which hey, wear what you like. But skinny jeans were our like intense fashion thing. I think skinny jeans, this is my prediction. Skinny jeans and girls with lip filler are our generation's mullets. What do you think about this theory?
Skinny jeans and girls with lip filler.
When you can tell that they've been jacking up their lips.
Are our generation's mullet.
Yeah, because when you would see a mullet in a photo,
yeah,
you'd be like, what were you all thinking?
What were you thinking?
And everyone had them? You were all doing this?
I'm concerned about the skinny jeans thing because, well, you and I both wore skinny jeans as skinny as they got for quite a long time. There's quite a lot of photo and video evidence of us wearing those. So far, we haven't filled our lips with anything, so we're safe from that. But I'm concerned about how, if this proves to be true, how those visual records treat us over time. But the mullet's coming back.
Exactly.
Non-ironically.
Right, but that doesn't matter for when we saw it.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
The mullet coming back is like the color brown coming back. It had to skip a couple cycles because it was so intense when it was here.
Yeah.
Because sometimes things come around like after one cycle. You're like, didn't we just do this? Like we had a moment where like we're kind of going back to like low rise jeans for a sec. It was like, wait, didn't we just do this? Yeah. But like mullets and brown were so intense. It's like, no, we're not ready. Skip a generation, skip a generation. Ready. Okay, we forgot about this atrocity. Bring it back in a new way. And we're like, we're ready to be heard again.
Yeah. Mustache is coming back too.
Oh, if only I could.
Hey, what benchmark should a church use to determine if they should launch a podcast?
So you have down here the stat that 44% of all podcasts have less than 3 episodes.
That's right.
You have it in quotes without a citation.
That's right.
The only reason I mention it is because this has become a stat that people frequently cite. And I'm worried it's actually one of those stats that isn't based in anything, but we've all just said it so many times that we think it's true. It could be very much well be true. The general advice you hear is like, most podcasts don't have more than 10 episodes. If you get past 10, you're like in the top 10% of podcasts ever, which just seems like we've said it so many times now that I don't know if it's true anymore, irrespective of the truth of that statistic.
Yes, I think at the very least the sentiment is true. Is that a lot of folks have a good idea for a show or the energy for a show, and they do the work to set up a microphone or what have you. They've got enough concept to generate a few episodes, and they don't have the endurance or the foresight to keep going, to push back past the barrier of not having that stroke of genius anymore, and it just results in shows not having longevity over the short term and definitely over the long term. And so I think at the very least that sentiment is probably true for most shows.
That's fair. So what benchmarks do I have? These are just 5 questions to ask yourself. Number 1, can you sustain it? You know, before we launched this video show, one of the reasons it took us so long to get into the video studio, even though we had been filming 700 plus episodes, was because we needed to find a sustainable editing workflow to put out the quality product every single week. So can you sustain it? Number 2, is their interest in it.
And not just your interest in recording yourself and putting it on the internet.
Right. The topic, the subject matter that you'll be covering, are there people that want to listen to that? Number 3, what will the format be? We've kind of settled in at this point to once a month we do a mailbag Bro Church Tools episode like this one. Once a month we have a guest. And then twice a month we do like specific topics. And that's kind of like the monthly rhythm of this show. For a while, we had every episode was Q&A. For a while, we had every episode was a guest. And I think that I'm liking this format the most so far because there is variety and we're not doing the same thing every single week. So what's your format going to be? Number 4, do you have a passion for it? Or is this a thing where you're like, oh, our church probably should do a podcast? Right. In the church space, you might feel like obligation to do a podcast. Typically, people start podcasts because they do have a passion to talk or because of the subject matter. But in the church case, do you feel this is just a responsibility? We should be doing this, or do you really want to? And then number 5, how will you measure success? Podcasts are famously non-sexy in their metrics. You'll be like, oh, my reel got we had a reel pop off. It had 120,000 views. It might take me 18 years to get 120,000 downloads on this podcast, sort of thing. So what does success look like for you? How are you going to use it in the context of your church ministry already? Those are the 5 questions that I would ask. You want to be satisfied with each of the answers and then go forward knowing, okay, we need to commit to doing this for a year. 1 episode a week every year, or 1 episode every 2 weeks for a year. I don't go on shows as a guest unless they've already published 10 episodes. People come to me commonly without 10 episodes. I say, get your 10 published. Invite me again. And then when I see that second invite come in, I'm always saying yes because I know that they stuck to it. A lot of times, that second invite never comes.
Right. Next question. When is a time since having this ministry that you feel like you've missed on giving advice?
So I gave this some thought, and my best answer was more about how I've given the advice versus what advice I've given.
Isn't that true?
I have been pretty hard on my stance on I don't think churches need an app. I've been pretty hard on my stance that live streaming there are better options for most churches. I've been pretty hard on my stance that rev share in giving companies is bad. I'm content with all the answers that I've given over the 10 years on those 3 fronts. I think those are probably 3 of my most quote unquote hot takes, controversial. But I think that I, in my youth, have been abrasive in how I've come across topics. I remember getting into this space and just feeling like nobody is saying what they think. I would hang out with people and they would say their opinions, and then online they would always be so vanilla. And I always thought that was strange. I would talk to pastors in real life and they would talk one way, and then they get on stage and they would be in their pastor voice. And I was like, that isn't what I'm used to hearing from you. And I told myself, I was like, I am going to say things online that I think.
Yeah.
And I remember people being like, you're so brave. In the DMs, I can't believe you said that. And I was like, I'm just saying what my convictions are. That being said, sometimes my tone was abrasive. There's just that vigor of youth. You're just we need to change the world at all costs. And so you can be so hard line on something, or so us versus them, or so abrasive is the best term. And so I think how I said things, I become more measured in how I discuss certain topics. But I also think that I've probably become too soft in some ways. Sometimes I need to stick to my guns, and it's not abrasiveness, it's just conviction. And that can be a hard needle to thread where you're am I being a jerk, or am I just staying true to my convictions? Am I adjusting my wording to be quote unquote more nuanced, or am I adjusting it so that it's not as harsh, so that I'm not getting as much blowback because people are like, oh, he must not really mean that.
Yeah.
Tricky.
And that's a universal truth, I think, in any and all communication. We have this kind of rule in our home that you can be right, but if you say it the wrong way, you are wrong. And so much of how we communicate interpersonally, not just from a platform or on our social media accounts or whatever, but on a podcast, but so much of how we communicate interpersonally is and how much of that is received well is dictated by our tone of voice, our posture, the spirit behind what we're saying, not just what we're saying, but the spirit behind what we're saying. So I think that's just universally true. What's one thing that's made you the happiest in the last week?
Do you have an answer for this?
Yeah, I have been spending a lot of time in the forest hunting this year, trying to harvest deer for our family for the next year. and it's been a hard hunting season. I haven't harvested anything, and that comes at a cost, like to me personally and to my family. It's just not easy to try and collect food this way. But being in nature, I've said this on the show before, like being in nature is oftentimes like where I feel like in closest proximity to God, like in his creation, like unplugged, like no phone, no AirPods, no nothing. And just this last week, I had an awesome hunt. I was hunting in a place where I don't normally see a high density of deer, and I got out there before the sunrise, and the temperature was perfect. The sunrise was like, the best way I can describe it is glorious. Like just the color, like the sky just exploded. And then I got to watch this like family of deer come from a spot where I didn't expect them to come. And I had like a 20-minute interaction with them. I wasn't able to, I didn't have a shot available, but I just had this 20-minute interaction with these deer and watched them like just do their thing. And it was probably the most at peace I felt in a long time. And it was, I felt so like full of content after that hunt. So that was probably the happiest I've been in the last week.
And then they stepped into the right spot, and you murdered them all.
No shot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I it's been a pretty challenging couple of weeks for me, and I was thinking about my most happiest, and I think it was on a walk yesterday with Sadie, our 15-month-old, 16-month-old, and she hasn't been able to come on our daily walks as much lately because she's been so sick. I'm confident if I put her in her stroller, she'd fall asleep. We have the stroller weatherized now, so we call it her spaceship because like it actually has like a little like dome for her. So I'm confident she'd fall asleep in her spaceship. But she'd just woken up for her nap. Mom needed a break, so I put her in the stroller. I'm walking her around, and we get to the chicken house, and the chickens are outside. And she's just been so miserable because she's sick. She's got this nasty, like, wet cough, and she's just, like, hacking. So I take her out of her spaceship, and she sees the chickens, and she's pointing, and she's like, the box, the chickens, and she's waving, and she just, like, has this big smile on her face, which she hasn't had very much recently, and then we continue on the walk. And so it's just, like, these brief moments, which is, I don't know, depressing to say out loud. It's like,
no, it's great.
It was this tiny moment where life was not awful for 1 second.
Yeah, that matters.
This is worth it.
Well, that's a struggle. If you don't take enough time to pay attention to even the smallest of moments, you can find yourself in like real despair depending on what's going on in your life. And sometimes it is just a brief moment, a glimmer of hope or a glimmer of happiness in this case, but those matter.
I mean, my saddest moment was probably when I was watching football after church with our friends, with my pastor, and, we were watching, and a guy caught a touchdown, and I was like, yes, because I thought he was one of my fantasy football guys, and then I saw the name on the back of the jersey, and it was a different guy.
Oh, that sucks.
And
somebody else's
like,
team.
Yeah.
Earning points for somebody else.
Yeah, at least it wasn't earning points against me.
Yeah, I mean, I lost for my second Sunday in a row, so I didn't have a good Sunday either.
Yeah.
Fantasy, Snapchat. I don't hear you talk about it that often. How can we do digital ministry in that space filled with younger folks?
Yeah, so we don't talk about it too much because Snapchat is basically used as like a texting app for youth, mostly, and young adults. So there isn't too much publicly going on. And so that does present a challenge for youth pastors and youth leaders. Like, okay, how am I to engage in a platform where like it's mostly done privately? For some little bit of church, pro-church tools history, in 2016, I had an entire course done on Snapchat. We went to Denver. We filmed it in this really cool location. And the day we finished filming, Instagram released stories in a public release. Right? And we were just about to see people were about to go to Snapchat. Like there had been a bunch of holdouts from like older millennials who were just like, don't jump it on Snapchat. It's just for these kids. And I'm like, okay, fine, we'll go over. And then Instagram stories drops and all these people were like, ha, now we'll stay here. And so, and after that, Snapchat really just kind of like, it didn't take off. Like it had established its base, but it didn't really take off from there. And, we talked about asking churches if they used TikTok recently, and 10% of churches said, yes, we use TikTok. And that's in our audience.
Yeah.
People that follow me for social media.
Yes.
So,
where we've been saying for 5 years, you should be on TikTok.
Assuredly, the actual number is much lower than that. So Snapchat would be even lower than that. And so it's really just us not talking about it because there isn't a demand for us to talk about it. But being active on a platform like that is very much like, in the DMs of Instagram. It's just, it's communication back and forth with folks. And you have to kind of line up your policy on if that's safe in your ministry.
Well, you just said it, using the words policy and safe, because when we have talked about Snapchat in the past, that's one thing that we have highlighted is that with that app, because of the nature of the disappearing images and messaging, there is a particular vulnerability to that platform when it comes to the safety of youth in your church. Like it just is what it is. There's not a whole lot of traceability with a record of communication in there. And so when it comes to policies and safety, it's very likely not the safest place to communicate to the youth, the minors in your church. So that's probably why we don't have a strategy for using it. Next question. How can I help my ministry find our voice for posting on social?
I love this question because back in the day, it used to just be like, how can I post on social? And now we're starting to think more intelligently about these things. Like, okay, how can I find our voice? So really easy, or at least the framework is easy. Doing the work, not so easy. First thing is to copy one person. Find someone you like, and you're going to end up talking like they talk. Your voice is going to be like theirs. This is how it starts for everyone. There's a pastor that you look up to, you love their preaching style, and you find you're preaching like them. Then you want to copy multiple people. You got 3 pastors that you like to listen to, and you have a bit of all of them. And now you've kind of taken their individual styles, remixed all of them to create something new. And then it's just iterating. What we find though is sometimes people are they want to wait to find their voice before they publish, but in reality, you find your voice through publishing.
Yeah, that's right.
Think about being a preacher. 10 years ago, the way Alex preached is not how he preaches now. If he had just been sitting on the sidelines being I'm going to wait until I'm my fully formed preaching self, well, he never would have gotten there.
Yeah.
In fact, his voice is only found by talking.
Yeah.
By preaching.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to do the work. But to start, it's okay to copy one person. I tell my wife this all the time, in the fashion sense. She's like, I'm 32. How am I supposed to be dressed? I usually need to find someone with a similar body shape, similar age, similar height that you like. Just copy what they do only. And then when you wear something that they wear and you go, this thing, I love how this fits. That makes sense. I expected this to fit on me good, but it doesn't. Why not? It's same in a voice or a preaching style. You preach the way someone else preached. I like that. But when I said this thing the way they said it, that didn't sound like me. Okay, you've just learned something about yourself.
Yeah.
The more that you do that, the more you learn about yourself, and now your voice is uniquely yours.
And there's no harm in doing that because what we're not advocating for is copying the content, right? You're not copying their content strategy. You're not literally copying and pasting what they're saying on their social posts and using it as your own. You are copying their tone, the way they use emojis, the way they ask questions, this, that, and the other. And over time, like you said, you'll you'll find your own voice, and you only find your own voice by using it. So just keep using it.
The same thing in athletes. You can look at Kobe and how he moved, and you can overlay it with Jordan. Right. And you can be like, oh wow, Kobe was clearly emulating Jordan. And yet, in that, Kobe would copy Jordan, and then he'd be like, you know what though? For me, against this competition, I need to do this. For me, I actually have this strength, so I can do this differently. For me, I have this weakness, so I should not do it this way. And so you can see the legacy, but it's still uniquely Kobe.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think we got time for one more question.
All right.
50th and final question on this episode of the Bro Church Tool Show. How do I know what to post on social that will best serve my audience?
Again, a great question. We're approaching this more intelligently. So I would say the challenge of threading the needle here is between meeting their cravings versus meeting their needs. I'm talking about our kids a lot. My daughter would prefer to eat one thing. I would prefer her to eat something else.
Right.
If I was just trying to serve her, I know that she would gobble up more Halloween candy. But we also need to establish good eating habits, something that I and my wife did not establish when we were younger. We're trying to do better, but it's a generational curse apparently. Everything else is good though. So this is our one thing.
Everyone's got a thing.
Yeah, exactly. So best serving your audience. The reason this can be tricky is because you can look at a piece of content this post it performed better than we've never seen that many likes. We've never seen that many views. The engagement was crazy. Let's do more like that. But you can get big metrics by posting outrage. You can get big metrics by posting the happy birthday to the pastor post every year. Yeah. It'll probably be your best performing post, but that isn't something that you can repeat. And so you can't only go off metrics. And so the challenge is basically how do you best serve people's needs, but also don't stoop to their wants. And especially in church where the entire message is go die, it becomes even more challenging, right? Because again, you can make the comparison to preaching. You don't want to just preach something that will make people feel great about themselves, because you also need to preach Christ crucified and also go crucify yourself, go die. Kill your own wants and desires for the purposes of serving others. I don't know, not a message that a lot of people want to hear.
A little countercultural.
So one easy practical solution for this is like one for them, one for me. So you can post something, hey, this is going to be a banger. People are going to like it. It's going to get a ton of engagement. And then we're going to post one that's also like, hey, I think this is what you need. There's what you want and there's what you need. With social sermons or with reels, what we'll often do is meet people. You can do this with a carousel as well. Meet them with their want and then bring them to their need. So if we want to talk about gratitude, we're not going to start there because nobody cares. But we might start with something that piques their interest. It's like, oh, what's that? Oh, kind of like, no, that's a little, oh, what's that? And then we bring them to the place that we want them to go. And so balancing those two.
Yeah. So good.
Wow, we're going to get to the very end and you're not even going to give your thoughts because you're like, let's wrap this up.
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Yeah. Outstanding. Well, thank you, as always, for listening. You can send in your questions to hello@prochurchtools.com. You can shoot a DM at Brady Shearer on Instagram. You can comment below on this YouTube video for next month's episode of Bro Church Tools. If you're listening at this point, just want you to know that we really value you. Yeah. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your trust. We'll talk real soon.
Same sweater, different color?
Yeah.
Nice.
Guess who makes this?
Abercrombie. No, it's like more bougie than that. It's not American Eagle. It's an aggressive drop. It's not Zara. DS.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you nailed it.
There you go.
Look at you. I cannot believe you pulled that out.